All right, sitting down with us today for the podcast, we have award-winning sportscaster for TSN. He's also the author of the new book, Beauties, Hockey's Greatest Untold Stories. And best of all, he's a local Ottawa lad as well, too. We've got James Duthie on the phone. How are you doing today, sir?
Good, Kyle. How you doing?
Doing really well. Thanks for joining us. Things are good in your neck of the woods there?
Things are fine, despite the fact that moments before you called me, I dropped a 12-pack of beer in the garage and shattered about 4 bottles. And so now my entire garage is going to smell like a brewery, but I don't mind that. Could smell worse, right?
Could be worse for sure. At least there were some survivors in the pack, though. That's the main thing.
There were survivors. I actually haven't opened it up yet because I don't want to see the carnage, because you hate to lose a couple of guys like that along the way, right? It's a tragedy.
Yeah.
So I don't know how many souls were lost.
Yeah. Some fallen soldiers along the way. So, we tried to get you on a little bit earlier, but you had this small event that not many people have heard of called the Masters that you had to attend there. And we're happy to have you on now, but I've got to know, what was it like at Augusta this year with all the restrictions and everything in place? It had to be a little bit different for sure.
It was strange and ultimately amazing. It was very different with the restrictions. When this all happened, and going back to the spring and the summer, I really didn't think we would be able to go, and completely understandably. But as things went on, we felt there was a way that we could make it happen. And the Masters is a really important event for TSN, and so we really desperately wanted to go. And one of our people, Nicole Anderson, put together this entire plan where we'd get tested a bunch of times. We would take a bus down, so we'd all be together in our own little bubble. We could only go between the house and the golf course. So there was all these limitations, but the actual tournament itself was unbelievable, because when you cover the Masters, it's an unbelievable event. It's one of my favorite things of the year. I feel so privileged to cover it, but it's a really hard tournament to cover on the golf course, because I have to do, as soon as the round is over every day, I have to do like an hour post game show. And so no cell phones. I think most people know you can't, if you're a fan, whatever, you can't bring your cell phone onto the golf course. So no communications, only those old scoreboards. So no electronic scoreboards. So you really don't know what's going on around the golf course except for the scoreboards and the roars. And because there's no fans and no roars, and you can't see anybody. Like, there's so many people out there. We're not inside the ropes. At some tournaments like the PGA Championship, the US Open, if I have my media pass, I can walk inside the ropes. But at the Masters, you can't. And so if Kyle's there, you have the same opportunity to see Tiger Woods, whatever, as I do. So often, if you want to follow Tiger or DJ, you're 20 people back in the crowd. You see the tip of his hat. That's about it. So in this circumstance, with nobody out there, it was unbelievable. It was like you had the whole golf course to yourself. And I followed Tiger for 9 holes on Thursday, and it was, his gallery was myself, my producer Puffy, Peyton Manning, who's a member of Augusta National, and Tiger's girlfriend. Those were the 4 people following Tiger. So it was kind of surreal. And on Sunday, following DJ on his 17th tee shot. So here's a guy about to win the Masters in historic fashion. I had to step back because my shadow was over his ball on the tee. So that it shows you how close we were to everything. So yeah, it was a once in a lifetime to be able to cover it that way, and see the golfers up close, listen to the conversations with the caddies. I'll never have the experience again. So not an ideal scenario for watching at home and everything, but selfishly, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. No, obviously a wild experience there. You had to almost feel like, a multi-billionaire or something there, where it's, okay, I'm just going to rent out the course and just watch these guys in their natural habitats to myself.
Right. Well, put it this way. The only people on there, I said, like, you know how you can just smell the really rich?
Yeah.
And I guess they were either members or, like, there was you could not, Wayne Gretzky couldn't get on. They only gave one pass to Dustin Johnson's fiance wife, Paulina. And so I figure if Wayne Gretzky can't get on this, who can? But the few people that were kind of around come Sunday just looked so ridiculously rich. So I don't know if they were members or members' wives or just people who had connections. But there was a handful of people there that you said, okay, you're not media, you're not an Augusta official, so you either have to be a member or you really got to know somebody.
Yeah, there you go. All these heiresses and whatnot there. And
exactly.
Cruising around.
Exactly.
So, what was it like, just as far as the actual course itself? Because obviously, the Masters usually happens in the spring. We've now
Mhm.
got sort of a full season worth of play in it. It's at the fall. Was it in better condition, a little bit worse condition than in years past, or was it about the same?
It was. I didn't notice a huge difference, except I think you saw this on TV. Some of the hillsides and stuff were a little, not gnarly is not the right word, but the grass had grown in a little bit, and that's why
Mhm.
you saw some balls stop on the hill on 12 and places like that, 15, that would not have stopped. I don't think in April.
Mhm.
Um, it just grew in a little bit, and besides that, though, it was unbelievable, and it was actually probably more beautiful than it usually is because there was nobody there. You
Yeah.
got to see, for example, the side of the hill on 16, there's usually about 5,000 people sitting on the side of the hill, and there's nobody there. So it's all just, green and flowers and um, that part of it. And the other thing that you don't see on television is that, usually there's some sort of rain somewhere during the week at Augusta, whether it's during the practice rounds or something. And there's so many people there that the areas where people walk between the holes or down the sides of the holes, they get mucked up really bad. And they pour this stuff that's kind of like, it must be made of horse manure because it smells like horse manure. But it's like this sort of green, sandy type stuff to cover it up. So, CBS does a wonderful job. You don't see that on Sunday. You only see the beauty of the golf course, but sometimes in between it can get a little messy.
Yeah.
And it wasn't messy because there was just nobody out there. So the whole course, which is always pristine, was completely pristine. And yeah, very cool experience.
Yeah, yeah. So from one major event right into another, there you just do the Masters, and now we're right into World Junior season here. Is this time of year known more for Christmas or World Juniors at the Duthie household?
I would say in a lot of Canadian households, it would be pretty dead even, wouldn't it? And I mean, that's the thing I love. Before I started doing it for TSN, it was always what my family did. And now that I'm fortunate enough to cover it, I will say in my early years when my kids were little, it was tough because you were always leaving Christmas Day or something. And as much as I love the tournament, it's hard to leave little kids on Christmas. But as they got older, they started coming with me if it was in North America. And so it became something they really looked forward to. And they were going to come this year, I think, and sort of spend Christmas in Banff or something, and then come down to Edmonton for the games. And obviously that got all thrown askew. But yeah, it's a huge part, I think, of Canadian Christmas season. And obviously this year is still somewhat up in the air. We have to get all these teams here by Sunday, and that's going to be interesting. Sweden's having a heck of a time with all sorts of positive tests.
Mhm.
Uh, so I hope they can get. I hope that we can get there because as long as it's safe, and I think the NHL has shown that once you get to the bubble, it's safe. I think it's a needed distraction for Canada and a lot of the countries overseas during these holidays.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, that there is so much still in play. Even Team Canada, the team's not 100% set yet, but I mean, you and Bob just did a special just the other day there. Looking forward to it there. You know, at this point, there's probably some, not written in stone, but are pretty close to locks to making the team at this point. So we kind of know who is going to be on the main part of the roster. Maybe some of the fringe players still aren't set yet there, but off the top of your head, who are some players that you think might have some of those really impactful moments for Team Canada this year, like an Eberle style goal or something like
Yeah,
that, just taking on those
yeah.
roles?
Well, I mean, I'll pick some obvious guys. Kirby Doc is one. So Kirby Doc played all of last season with the Chicago Blackhawks, so he couldn't play in the World Juniors. And if you remember, come playoff time, if you watched any of what the Hawks did, he was got the second most minutes next to Patrick Kane in the playoffs, more than Jonathan Taves.
Hmm.
So by playoff time, he'd become in many ways, their second most important forward on the Chicago Blackhawks. So for a guy like that to be able to come back and play in the World Juniors a year later, he has the potential to really dominate when you've played at that level. And so I think he's one for sure. Bowen Byram on defense for Canada. Again, same sort of deal where I think he'll walk into the National Hockey League and be a star right away. So at this tour, he was really good before this tournament. as a 19-year-old. I think he has the potential to be, absolutely spectacular. So those are the two guys I would say. You could go down the list. Connor McMichael scored in probably Canada's four most important games last year, or four of the most important at the World Juniors. He's back. It's a really, the whole dream team thing gets overused, even though we used it on that show you were talking about. But because of the situation with no NHL, this is really only the fourth time that Canada's had the availability to take the best players 19 and under in the country, except for Alexis Lafreniere, who's between him and the Rangers is not coming. And so it's stacked. I think there's 18 first rounders vying for forward spots. So you're going to get, you're going to get 5, 6, 7 first round picks getting cut from the forward spots, which is just ludicrous.
Yeah. Blue chippers across the board this year for sure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, on paper, at least, Canada would be in the quote unquote easier of the two divisions there. In Pool B, you've got traditional powers like Russia, you got the States, you got Sweden in there. The Czechs are always dangerous as well, too. So, if we just focus on Pool B, what are some things that we should look out for? And, is this the year Sweden finally starts losing some, round robin games? Or how do you see that shaking out?
I think when people look at the groups, that there's a tendency to say, "Oh, this is great for Canada. They're in the easier group this year." But that's a dangerous game to play, because I think come playoff time, if you happen to lose to Finland, let's say, and you finish second in your group, then somebody gets upset on the other side. You could end up playing the Americans or the Russians or the Swedes in a quarterfinal game, which you don't want. So sometimes I think it's better to be in the tougher group, at least win one of the games against, your formidable opponents, and at least finish first or second, and then you usually have an easier game in the quarters. Sweden, I tell you, you never want to throw a game, but I wouldn't be upset if I were the Swedes. I think that streak has become an albatross for them. To go 13 years without losing a game in group play and have one gold medal to show for it is what should be a huge, measure of pride, is almost an embarrassment now for them. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a good chance that this is the year they lose to Russia or the US. The Russians look really strong again. And because of the situation with Sweden, positive tests, they've lost 3 key players already. Their coaching staff's a bit of a mess with a bunch of positive tests there. So if there was a year that Sweden was going to lose, if they do make it over here, then I would say it would be this year. And I don't think that's a bad thing for the Swedes to get that thing over with.
Yeah, get the monkey off their back there.
Yeah, exactly. Sneak in, win a gold medal in a sneaky way. Lose a couple of games, finish third, and then upset some people. I think that would be take the pressure off them come the medal round.
Yeah, no, for sure. And, almost as soon as the World Juniors wrap up, they had the announcement yesterday, you're almost going, a week break, and then the NHL is starting up again. When you're looking at that schedule, are you thinking, holy geez, I got a lot of hockey in my future? Or is it kind of nice to get back to the routine of things after?
Yeah, no, I look at it in a positive way. I mean, there are some years when I am tired. Look, what we do is we're not digging ditches, but it is a little bit like mentally exhausting. Doing a couple of games every day, and I'm tired usually the week after the World Juniors. But no, we've had so much time off. I can't wait. Throw as much hockey at us as possible. So I'm just hoping the NHL can actually start there in the middle of January, and juniors will end for a week or so, and then we'll be up and at them.
Yeah. So speaking of the NHL there, obviously your new book, Beauties, is now out right now. And for those that are listening, go out and grab a copy. Makes a great Christmas gift there. Slide it right under the tree. But I mean, you've got all sorts of levels of stories, from NHL players to just, your hockey mom and dad and everything else in between there. How did sort of the seed of the idea for this book get planted in your head?
I think it was all those years, Kyle, just sitting on the panel. And probably the best part of my gig is that you get all these ex-NHLers or current NHLers or coaches between jobs that come sit next to you on the panel. And they all have great stories. And most of the best ones they tell are not on TV. Mm-hmm. It's when we're sitting around watching the games or before the games. And I sort of had this library in my head of some of these stories I'd heard before. And I've read a lot of hockey books, biographies and stuff, but I'd never read a book that was just good stories. That was the only purpose of it, was just to tell great stories. And so that's what I thought I'd try to do, is just call guys and say, tell me your favorite hockey story. Like if it was Kyle and me and Wayne Gretzky in a bar, and that's what you want, right? If you get a moment with guys like that, you want to hear the stories. And so that's kind of what I wanted to do to people. I wanted to write a book where they felt like they were sitting in a bar with somebody and just hearing great hockey stories. And so the people that I asked, I just said, tell me your favorite hockey story that's somewhat repeatable in a book.
Yeah.
And that was the simple premise behind it. And you're right, I wanted to cover all of hockey. I just didn't want it to be, retired players who often tell the best stories, or current players, to have everyone in hockey in the book, not just players, but referees and agents and coaches and parents, and sort of cover the full spectrum of what hockey is.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, it's such a simple concept too, right? Like anyone who's ever played hockey knows that some of the most hilarious, unbelievable stories that you'll hear get told usually like in a hockey locker room or something like that. So you sort of mentioned you were reaching out to people once you sort of word got out there that you were putting this book together. Was it still you reaching out to people and trying to get stories and approvals, or were people starting to say, oh, James, I got this great story for your book here, let me tell it to you? Like, what was that process like?
Yeah, there was definitely a little bit of that. And I think if I was to write a sequel, that there'd be more of that, because since the book came out, I've heard from a lot more people saying, oh, I've got one that would have been perfect in your book.
Yeah.
But it's funny, Kyle, when I started writing it, you're terrified you're not going to get enough good stories, right? Am I really going to get a hold of all these people, and will they have great stories?
Mm-hmm.
And I was lucky. I pretty much got a hold of everybody that I wanted to. There's a few that I didn't, that I'll hopefully hook up if I do another one of these books. But what I would do often at the end of the interviews, particularly the early ones, was at the end of the interview, I'd say, is there anybody else that you played with or coached that it was a great storyteller? Because even though the big names are in it, like Gretzky and Crosby and McDavid and Orr and so on, I wanted to have great storytellers. I didn't really care if they were big names or not, right?
Mm-hmm.
So John Cooper, for example, the coach of the Lightning, he told an amazing story in the book. And at the end of the interview, he goes, I said, is there anybody that you've coached that you think I should talk to? And without missing a beat, he says, Eric Nielsen.
Mm-hmm.
I coached this guy, Eric Nielsen, in the minors, one of the greatest storytellers ever. So I call Eric Nielsen. Turns out he was Sidney Crosby's roommate in Rimouski, and we do an entire chapter on Sidney Crosby as a teenager and this wild roommate that he had. And then one of my favorite chapters in the book. So it kind of worked like that, right? Where people would recommend Kelly Chase, who's a great storyteller, was a gold mine, saying, you got to talk to Jim McKenzie and Garth Butcher, two old-time hockey guys. And, those guys told fantastic stories from like the 80s and 90s. So, that was, a little bit of one guy recommends another guy recommends another guy, and that's how it came together.
Yeah, yeah. So over the course of putting these stories together there, did you ever come across a story where it's like, oh, that's an unbelievable story, but there's not a chance in hell my publisher is going to let me put this on paper? Did you sort of go through it with a fine-tooth comb and sort of make it more PG, or did you just straight omit those stories altogether?
Yeah, that was pretty much my entire conversation with Jeff O'Neill. Jeff has the greatest book ever that will never be published.
Yeah.
of his stories. I think for the most part, it didn't happen. There were a couple that I cut out, but for the most part, I think the guys knew that the stories were going to go in a book, and guys are smart enough that I'm not going to tell you that one because, or I'll tell you this one, but you can't put it in the book.
Yeah.
But, for the most part, they're, all the stories they told are in there. I didn't want it, I wanted it to be really what hockey is like. And, when Kelly Chase is telling a story about Bobby Hull, staying in his hotel room and going around the floors, picking up food from food trays, from other people's food trays outside. I mean, that's a story I'd heard, but I never thought it would be told before. But Kelly told it, right? Here's this guy who's his lifelong idol, Bobby Hull, and he's coming back to the room with a tray full of half-eaten chicken wings and burgers that he's picked up in the hallway. So,
all right. So right now, I mean, you've got a book out. We just had Bob McKenzie on the show. He's got a book out. Rick Westhead from TSN has a book out in the fall there.
yeah.
Like, was this something that was planned beforehand? Do you have some sort of a TSN office pool going on as to who can sell more copies, or just free happenstance that everyone released at the same time?
Yeah, we didn't know, independent of, I try to actually avoid having books come out the same year that Bob has books out, because Bob's books always do really well. Um, but yeah, we do have some fun little, Bob and I were doing that World Junior show the other night, and we were making cracks about product placement and whether we should be holding books up on the desk and so on and so forth. So yeah, we talked a little bit about it, but we're too good friends now to have too big competition. I just, you know what, I think Bob's done 4 books now, and I've done 4 books, and that's all happened over the last decade, maybe 12 years. So, and Rick Westhead's, he's a journalist and a writer, who's, I think, put out a couple. So I think you could try to pick a year where nobody has it. I will say this, and I apologize. I don't enjoy, I love doing conversations like this with you, but I hate having to shamelessly promote all the time, on Twitter and places like that. That's not my favorite thing in the world to do. And I know people get annoyed. I was joking the other day on Twitter that everybody's probably muted me anyway, but it's kind of, if you're going to work hard for a year on something, and you owe it to your publisher to try and sell as many books as possible. So you just hope people tolerate it for that 1 month before Christmas that you have to do it. And my life goes back to normal afterwards.
Yeah, the big holiday push there is obviously a big one for you.
Yeah, it is. I know I've done more podcasts this month than I think I've done in my lifetime. So.
Yeah, there you go. You're getting them all out of the way within December there.
That's right. That's right.
Awesome. So before we let you go, given the fact that you are from Ottawa, we're based in Ottawa as well too. I've got to get at least one Sens prediction out of you for the year ahead. Given the fact that it's the All Canadian division, how do you think the hometown team's going to do this year?
I think they'll do better than people say. I think the general consensus, particularly in that Canadian division, is they're going to be the also-rans at the bottom. I think every single person has picked them last, saying there's 6 teams that all could win the division, and then there's Ottawa. I think that, I won't be surprised if they come last, but I think they're going to give people a lot harder a time than they expect. Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't be surprised if they're probably a year away and maybe 2 years away from true contention. But I wouldn't be surprised if they gave teams a lot harder time than people expected. Maybe if snuck in front of at least one team in that division by the time it was over. Mm-hmm. My biggest thing with the Sens, I'll just give you in 30 seconds here, tons of great prospects. Mm-hmm. But my concern would be they're all a ton of really good prospects, but are there great ones? Mm-hmm. Like, of all those guys they have coming, at least 2 of them have to turn out to be great. Mm-hmm. Like, out of, Shabbat might be on the cusp of that, but out of Shabbat, Brandstrom, Kachuk, Stutzla, all the kids from Belleville. You need 2 guys to become superstars. Mm-hmm. And that would be my one question is, are there just a lot of really, good players coming? Or because I think they need a couple of them to become superstars for them to really be something. And that's the thing for me to watch over the next couple of years is who are those guys that really emerge and that can be true stars in the NHL?
Yeah. Well, James, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you taking the time. The book is, Beauties, Hockey's Greatest Untold Stories. It's out now. For those that are watching the video version, there's a nice copy right there. James is doing his best Vanna White impression here. Go out and grab it. Makes a great Christmas gift. James, wish you all the best. Happy holidays to your family.
Kyle, it's an honor to be on a show with someone so decorated as you, with all those diplomas, the PhDs and the masters behind you on the wall. I don't think I've ever been on with someone with that level of education. So true honor for me. Thanks a lot, buddy.